So I will try to give very quickly an example of synergies in building a research infrastructure and how this synergy has anticipated, in fact, the synergies that we have been discussing today. I was sitting in the synergies group 5 years ago, and I was pushing in this direction on specific cases. So let's see how this one can work. First of all, let me let me state what is a research infrastructure. What we mean at European level within the European Forum for Research Infrastructures for what is the definition is a set of facilities or instruments which are unique or rare, and they are built and managed for external researchers, not for the owners. So this is the point. I mean, in the academia, this is a shock when you realize that you are making a very nice instrument and then you let it used by your colleagues outside. The users must be attracted by the quality of the instruments, and they are selected solely on the quality of the proposed projects. From around the world, they can come, they propose, they are selected by peer review, and they have not to pay to enter. The coverage can be made by the institutions, but the selection is not by the capability of paying. This is another very important point. The instruments, staff and management of these infrastructures are therefore fully exposed to competition at international level. Otherwise, they don't attract, and then they are not funded, and there they lose the post. So this is the point. So this is the principle on which these infrastructures are based. At this point, if you want to be competitive and if you want to be attractive, you have to make the best techniques or technologies, the best education, the best management also of the infrastructure. Otherwise, you are not going to survive. For this reason, the countries already in 2000, in the year 2002, set up a European Strategic Forum to try to coordinate the investments in these kind of infrastructures, which in some cases are very expensive. Not always, but in some cases are very expensive. So, and then this is ESFRI, road mapping at European level, and proposing to the European countries possible investments in infrastructures. And then I come to the specific infrastructure of which I am speaking. This is the extreme laser infrastructure, which will be the first in the world and the unique in the world. Most high-power lasers in the world have been developed for military purposes. This one will be for research only and completely open to researchers, not reserved for specific scopes. Is being built, and is almost built, almost completed, in 3 different countries, the Czech Republic, Hungary, and Romania. And is the first ESFRI project of the 40-plus ESFRI projects, which is completely developed in the Central Eastern European countries. So is trying to close the gap that is existing between West and East. Is pioneering also a funding model combining the use of structural funds with national framework program contributions and will be then managed as a European Research Infrastructure Consortium, ERIC, which is a new legal form which has been set up by the European Union. It's still unknown to most DGs, but is operating and is operating pretty well. So the milestones. In 2006, this was selected as a project, so well before anybody was speaking about synergies. In 2007, was funded by the by Framework Program 7 in a preparatory phase. Then in 2009, there was the decision to implement it as a unified distributed infrastructure. And in 2010, the three countries came forward saying, okay, we will use our structural funds in a coordinated way. In between 2011 and with the end in 2018 is the construction with more than 820 million euro, of which 15% is national funding. And then between 2015 and 2018, there is a further framework program project that is helping the transition between construction and operation in the future. This is the agreement. I never believed that it would be possible. I was stimulating as a chairman of ESFRI various countries to come forward. At some point, these three countries came forward, and the three ministers of research declared in the Competitiveness Council that they would invest in a coordinated way 800+ million euro of their funding to be able to develop this infrastructure. The structural funds have been allocated at national level because synergies did not exist, but still don't exist in this case. So we had to have three different operational programs, three different projects, and try to keep these projects coordinated. This was quite a feat. I mean, the key part here was the scientific council, not so much the management or the local operational authorities. The grant beneficiaries were individually responsible for the implementation, and the socioeconomic development, of course, had to be different for the various regions. Actually, here there is an important point. The local regional governments have been investing around the places in which these facilities are built. So we have technology parks that have been growing around the facilities already. So there is, even before the facilities are working, the technology parks are already operating. So there are already attracting some local and external companies. And then there has been this additional funding for technology transfer. So at this point, the funding model was very attractive. In the other European countries which were interested in these facilities, there was not enough funding available for the first investment. Now we are in the process of trying to attract these countries, which are very interested, in operating and supporting the operation. So we have a transition period which is rather difficult and interesting. There are many challenges. One is the institutional challenge. How can we keep these three investments, three teams, working on different funding with different authorities as one infrastructure at European level? So this is one challenge. And then the second challenge is the content of the application process in each country, which was twisting a bit the orientation of the project, also because in most cases the way in which these projects were assessed or evaluated was based on the local socioeconomic return, not on the international quality and excellence of the project, because it was structural funds. So at this point, this was twisting a bit. For example, the number of employees in the three places is not exactly what would be the best for a research project, are a bit larger because the socioeconomic return was calculated on the number of places. It was very interesting to try to develop the cost-benefit analysis for these infrastructures. And the users are entering for free. It's very different from a highway in which there is the toll. So at this point, who is paying for the users? So will be the other countries, the research institutions of the other countries who are interested in opening to their users the facility. But this is an indirect way to have an income. So it's an income that has to be calculated on assumptions which are very, very different from the assumptions of a highway. I mean, then the application process, the length of the application process. One thing that nobody said today, but I mean, I think is common understanding, structural funds start funding something only after the first half. The first half of the structural funds, you have politicians promising the whole lot to everybody. Then they start wondering whether they will be able to spend. And then finally, you have projects that are really funded. So again, in this case, we had very short time left to implement the real projects and get away from talking and start doing. So this is a very big challenge, and it keeps on being a challenge. In the present framework, we are already halfway. I don't know how many structural funds have already been spent. I suppose not very much. Then there is the management challenge, and the management challenge is connected to the fact that you have 3 teams, 3 different cultures, 3 different local institutions, and you have to bring them together and not get wasted along the line. So the institutional challenge is that there are many layers of responsibility and interest to protect and combine, and we heard it already said here. There are political and administrative constraints. One experience that I got when I was in ESFRI, about 2/3 of the national governments change at least every 2 years. And then you have to deal with new people, new frameworks, and so on. So the instability or the non-continuity that we are experiencing in Europe is very large. If you deal with regional governments, is even larger. And then the culture that is distributed in the various layers is very different. And then there is no communication, as we heard very well in the beginning. So institutional challenge, there is the risk of losing the larger international commitment, because there was the commitment of the builders, but not the commitment of the contributors. The preparation of the ERIC setup was slow, and now I go a bit faster through these challenges. So what we are now doing, we are trying to anticipate in 2017 the startup of the consortium that will bring these 3 facilities together. This is the funding, and the most important point is the final point. We have to find funding for about 80 million euro per year, and this is not covered by any funding scheme, European funding scheme, and also is overlapping with other facilities that are completing the construction in this moment. There is the European Spallation Source in Sweden. There is the XFEL, X-ray free electron laser in Hamburg. So there are other facilities that are in this moment completing and are in the same condition. I mean, the funding for construction has been found. The funding for operation, nobody wants to have it. This is when you deal with science, but I think when you deal also with other enterprises, there is the inaugurability of the infrastructure, which is can be very attractive to fund the construction, because and then if the volume is very big, is very inaugurable because it's very visible. The operation is not visible and is not very attractive. So this is one of the problems that we have. Now, I don't want to take off time from your lunch. I leave the various details. For example, there are problems in procurement. When you use structural funds for science, for scientific purposes, in which technologies are evolving very fast, the process of procurement, which is very long and very slow, is not fitting very well the needs. You have really to have some way in which the technical response and the technical adaptability of the procurement must be valued at higher level than, for example, only the cost. Okay, there are conclusions and recommendations, many of which have started to be applied in the synergy process. We were before the synergy process, so we had to invent synergies while going. And I think that there should be more adaptation of the various application process in general between Horizon 2020 and the various structural funds approaches. I think I will more or less stop here. I hope that I've given you an idea.